right, good morning everybody, and welcome to Hometown Cable. We're downstairs at the Knights of Columbus in Rouses Point, New York. My name is Bob Venn. Calvin Castine is on the camera. What's going on here? It is Sunday again, and these nice people you see here are either present Rouses Pointers or past Rouses Pointers. And Al Ryan is back up in the North Country and just finished his very successful trip with his baseball team, and he said that he thought of an idea, so I'll let Al tell you what his idea is and what we're going to attempt to do this morning. Nothing rehearsed. Al, tell people what you were talking about.
Somehow I knew we were going to do this.
All right, go ahead.
Actually, I thought I had, or had for some time, was that there are an awful lot of people who I knew, and these other people I'm sure knew as people growing up here who have since passed on or moved and have no relatives in the area anymore, have nothing such as a political career or something to leave their name behind where people are going to remember it. And I just thought it was a shame that so many of these people just fell off the face of the earth and their names may never be heard again, unless there was something such as Hometown Cable's TV program here that might at least preserve their names if we can think of them and bring them up. And maybe future generations will get to hear about them at least if we were able to do that. And that's pretty much.
Okay. And I called Dawn yesterday, I guess. Was it night before last? Yesterday?
Seemed like last evening.
And then she's made attempts to get a couple more people, and she's had some problems.
At 10 o'clock this morning.
And then she got Harold, and she tried you last night, Betty.
Oh,
Tried to reach you yesterday.
We're never
You're
home.
never home. Well, she knew where they are, and where are you in the morning if she could find you like that?
Having coffee at the Anchorage.
Every morning?
We keep using our commercial, and we never got paid for it.
No residuals.
That's right, you're on there, aren't you? Hey, that's right, you and Lester Hamill. Lester Hamill gets there too.
Yeah, well, everybody keeps telling me they saw you on TV. I said,
Calvin did it.
I saw it once.
And you know, this morning I told Al, I said, Al, Betty, and this is 10 o'clock. I said, Harold and Betty are going to be there. And he said, God, I just got some names from them this morning of some of these people.
Not this morning.
Was it this morning? Oh, I thought it was this morning.
A couple of days ago.
A couple days ago. All right. Let's start out. Al, give us a name. And, well, first of all, let's just find out a little bit about what are you doing out there.
I don't want to tell you how to be
baseball?
an MC, but you might want to introduce the other people.
Well, that would be nice. I thought they would know. All right, Don O'Boyle over on the end course is our village historian in Rouses Point, New York. There's too many people here this morning for me to remember. And she is, matter of fact, just got an award from the state, wasn't it? It just got a nice award. Don, tell us what that is.
It wasn't an award, it was just a notice that I'm the secretary of the Region 1 historian, that's all.
Well, that's an award. You're a secretary.
It's a
That's
lot of work.
does a great job. And if you haven't been up to the village office to see her memorabilia up there, you should. It's just upstairs over the village office. There's a small historian's office. All the old North Countrymen are there, and you get a nice reading. And Wednesdays?
You know that Bob Arnbright just gave the village a newspaper, 1865, excuse me, 3 or 4 of them, but the oldest was 1865.
What was the name of the
Before
paper?
our time.
Yeah, what was the name of the paper?
And, you know, I'm ashamed I can't
You know, all right.
but it's the one on the very fragile.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing. I looked it over as much as I could, but first, and there wasn't really a lot of news that time. They published stories, few advertisements, and little health remarks, and that's all, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Well, Harold's grandmother said a true lady only got her name in the paper 3 times. When she was born, when she was married, and when she died. Otherwise, you did not
You didn't get
make the news.
Particularly then, back yes. Now, Betty and Harold Miro, Mr. and Mrs., sitting there. Harold, what was your profession, Harold?
Railroad.
Railroad.
I was a railroad engineer.
For how many years?
43 years.
That's a lot. That's pretty near a career, right there.
Not the entire 43 years. You had to be a fireman for quite a few years. I started out as a fireman and ended up as an engineer.
Okay, and Betty, you just retired from the president of the library board?
30 years. 30 years. Before that I worked, or during that time too, I also worked in the village office, and I knew almost everyone in Rouses Point. When I'd see someone walking down the street I didn't know, I'd say, who is that?
Yeah.
Must be someone new in town.
Absolutely. How many children?
4.
Give us their names.
All married, 2 boys, 2 girls. Mary Nautel, Mark Miro, Hal Miro, who works at the hospital in Plattsburgh, and Buffy,
All right.
who works at Chauvin Agency.
At least 1 or 2 musicians in that group,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Al Ryan, former Rouses Pointer, now living in Vero Beach. How long have you been in Vero Beach?
18 years.
18 years, unbelievable. And our sons just recently got together, Saturday ago, or 2 Saturdays ago. They had a reunion of the class of 1975, 20 years. And Skip, his son, Ernest is his real name. No, anyone know him as Ernest? No. Skip Ryan came up and had a great time at the golf club. And good time was had by all. Your daughter was golf?
No, my daughter was, I think, 1 year ahead.
Okay.
She's old. She's 34.
She's 30. All right, so and with that, we're going to take a short break and let you call your Rouses Point friends and tell them to tune in and anywhere else in the viewing area, but particularly Rouses Point. There'll be a lot of Rouses Pointers to talk about this morning.
An hour.
We'll start right off, of course, with Al. Go ahead, Al.
Well, now that you said that we could deal mostly with Rouses Point, why don't we start with the Champlain?
Okay. Okay.
One of the names I had in mind was a gentleman who contributed an awful lot, I think, to the community, and maybe a lot of people weren't aware of exactly how much and in what vein, and that was Bill Earl, who had the bicycle shop down along the river. And I know that you're somewhat familiar with, so we can get you in on this. But my understanding is that Bill Earl provided bicycles for a lot of youngsters who otherwise couldn't afford them, that he often repaired bicycles for youngsters who couldn't afford the repairs, and that he, in general, although sometimes maybe termed eccentric in some ways, really contributed an awful lot to the community of Champlain back as we were growing up.
I don't know much about him. I say I got an article on the North Countryman when he died, and there was a very nice piece written about Bill Earl. And you hear a lot about Bill Earl. Lived on River Street, just across from the KFC's down that street, and never married. The word was that he was going out with someone in town. He liked this one lady, and her parents would not let him go out with Bill Earl. And from that point on, they broke up. The story was that he said that he would never marry, he told her, and he always wore knickers, right to the knees, in honor of not being able to marry that lady.
But did she marry?
I don't know. I don't, and I won't mention any other names. I've heard some names, but I'm not sure it's true of who the lady was. I don't know. I seems to be.
Sad.
It is sad. And he used to cook a lot of fish and chowder, and they'd come in there like 8, 10 at a time, and boys and girls. And I was telling someone, if someone did that today, they'd have him arrested, figure he must be molesting kids. Because he was such a nice person. The Greg wares.
Some of the articles about him, he was quite an environmentalist too. He'd take children for rides on a boat.
Yes.
A lot about the river and the history of it.
Well, you've been on those rides.
I went on bicycle rides.
With him?
I never went on bull rides.
With him?
Well, that's where I got my first bicycle from Bill Earl.
Well, tell us about
Well,
him.
my brother brought me up to Champlain and introduced me to Bill Earl and picked out a bicycle. He had a whole shed full of them. And if you wanted a bicycle, you needed a bicycle, you went to see Bill Earl.
Did you buy them or borrow them?
You could buy them or just, if you didn't have a bicycle, let you have one for the day. The kids would go all riding in the afternoon and
Yep.
he supplied the wheels.
I think
But you could buy them if you wanted to.
I think there's a story in that article about he used to bring sand from Vermont to the foundry in Champlain. That was somewhere where he'd raise some of his money. But it was a nice article written, and there was an article within the article someone wrote about Bill Earl, and there's no signatures to who it is. There's been some speculation, but the Gregoire boys were there an awful lot, and I know Larry Paquette and oodles of others, and we've been trying to do a separate story on Bill Earl. He was a character.
Well, part of it was his obituary in the North Country.
Yes, it said it was 3 columns in the obituary.
And the fish and the fish chowder probably explains the 2,000 cats that used to live with.
I understand there were cats all around, yes, yes. Now, Harold, if you don't have a copy, I'll give you a copy of that obituary if you don't have that. I didn't know you knew him.
I don't have one.
The
I'll give
fact-
you one.
He's supposed to be a Champlainer, but here's a Rouses Point boy that went
Oh,
on
yes.
rides and.
And there were many, and there were many.
And there were many.
We all knew about Bill Earl.
Yep.
He was
But there's an
Name
example
everybody.
of someone who was gone, and as far as I know, have no surviving relatives in the area, and then when our generation goes, who's ever gonna remember that Bill Earl existed?
I think Jimmy Earl, who lives on River Street now, that works at Pampelon, is a distant relative. And I believe Helen McCrae, who died recently, the teacher, her mother was Earl. I think her mother was Bill Earl's sister. You know, but that is a great person that.
So they were indigenous to Champlain.
Oh yes, yes, very.
And Bill Earl definitely was a part of our generation and played a major role in
Absolutely.
what went on here years ago. Let's try and get Dawn in on this some, because I have the name of a couple of teachers who I think that Dawn might remember. And again, you said we were going to deal with Rouses Point, so let's start with Moores.
All right.
And let's go to Lillian Blair.
Well, she was a fine teacher, I remember her well.
Taught
I
me
went to school-
geography. I don't know that Lillian has any relatives. She, of course, lived in Moores and taught in Rouses Point. And perhaps at Moores at some point probably did. But this is someone that Dawn would be very familiar with, and she was a fine teacher and taught me, as I said, geography in junior high school.
She, I went to school to her and I taught in the same system with her when I graduated. You know, she taught that long. She was still in the system when I came back as a teacher. And by then she was, I know one thing, she's a very saving woman. The teachers used to laugh at her. She'd wipe her hands and save the paper. You know, very neat person though, you know, she was. And
Didn't she have that powder blue convertible?
yeah,
Yes, she did. She had a powder blue convertible, and she was in her 50s with white hair, and she put a ribbon in her hair.
Is that-
She looked so jazzy, I thought.
Another one that we might discuss, and this was a lady who did an awful lot for a lot of young people on her own, tutoring without being paid for it. A nice lady lived on Champlain Street in Rouses Point, Sophia Giro.
Oh, I love this. She taught me to like history, she really did. And Mrs. LaValle, Miss LaValle, no, she was a Mrs. now. She was a laundry. And she really, it started my interest in history. She stayed and talked about the time that the yachts would leave the Windsor yacht boat would cross over and take the people across the lake there. And that hookup is still in that stone building opposite the old Saxon, you know. There was a big wheel, it's still there, they say, and there's a wire, a heavy wire that goes right across the lake. And they used to pull the boats back and forth on that thing.
Carol, did you have Miss Giro?
I had Miss Giro in the 5th grade, and I had Nellie LaValle in the 6th grade, and Mrs. LaValle died during my...
You killed her?
Probably, I don't know.
You just gave her some
I wasn't
incentive,
one
yeah.
of her favorite students.
Give her an incentive.
She taught my mother, my God, and she was an old woman when I got to her. And they put her in the 6th grade because she couldn't climb the stairs to the so-called 8th grade where she taught.
You wouldn't see that?
And during the course of that year, she passed away.
Yeah,
I remember I went to the funeral.
Because I used to stay after school and put pictures up. She didn't want to lift her arms. And
That's when we used to get Vera Christie for substitute teacher. Boy,
And she told how babe. I remember that one.
No, let's go with one other teacher who, as far as I know, has no one left in this area. Perhaps she does, but a name I haven't heard in a number of years, and was one of my teachers, Laura Ingalls.
And I don't remember that.
Do you remember Laura Ingalls?
no,
Lived
I didn't go to
at-
she come after me.
She taught history, and she lived on the corner of State and, as I recall, on the corner of State and Delaware.
Was she
Remember where
related
she
to
lived?
George?
I remember the
Pardon me?
house, but I
Was
don't...
George related?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
She wasn't such an old, because she must have been here when I went off to school because
Laura
I don't
Ingalls.
remember her when I went.
That's the one that wrote Little House on the Prairie.
Not the same one.
Probably not the same.
Not the same what?
But that was another one, and I didn't know whether you...
I remember her, but I don't remember having it. She never wasn't the school when I was.
Miss Ingalls had one leg smaller than the other.
Yeah, she was a little tiny woman,
Yeah,
wasn't she?
yeah, wore glasses, and she taught here for quite some time.
Well, maybe she was teaching in the grades then, because...
I think she was a grade, I think she did teach in grade.
He is so old, he's one of the few still alive that graduated from Rouses Point High School.
I did.
And that, you did too?
Yes, ma'am.
They went right from first grade, no kindergarten, from first grade right up through
You don't
12.
have to be so old to have done
I
that.
did too.
Well, I know, but
Now, Don,
not too many around can say that.
how many years did you teach here?
41.
41 years. Now,
Not all here, but most of them.
and you retired when?
82.
82. Now, just think, we're talking about someone who was in the 5th and 6th grade with Al. We're talking back a lot of years. Because we're the same age, you and I.
No, we're not.
No?
No.
Am I 3 months older than you?
You're older.
But you just think, won't it be nice that people will talk about you in the nice vein we're talking now, in another 40 years? They'll remember Don Oil.
I hope so.
Just think, though, that is a great honor. I mean, it's a lot of respect shown.
I spanked a few of those, so maybe
Well, oh, you spanked. You
You are
can't do that
known for
today.
your
once in
kindness.
a while.
What do you mean spank? How did you do that?
Oh, on the bottom once in a while.
What grade did you teach?
First grade.
Oh, when you
Really
did,
easy.
yeah.
Very definitely child abuse.
Do that,
This
do
day and
that
age.
today, they'd have you sued.
But
Yeah.
can you imagine all these little ones starting school, used to mama putting on their shoes
Yeah,
and their
yeah.
overshoes, and she had to go through that.
Remember when I was a practice teacher in Geneseo? In those days, we had to teach 10 weeks on the campus, 10 weeks away and so forth. And my turn to be on the campus, and that was always a worry because these children were accustomed to putting people through the works, especially the young teachers. And I walked in, and the senior teacher was ill that day, and I walked in, and there's always one child that gives you a hard time, right? And they had a beauty there. And he's playing with blocks. I said, he's not going to sit there and play blocks. He's going to learn something like the rest, so ambitious to prove the world, I guess. So I got him in the seat. And while I was doing it, he kicked me in the ankle so hard that I thought I would just break my wheelchair. And he raced out the door, and I chased him right around the practice field. And I grabbed him, and I warmed his bum. My leg, I think he broke my ankle. Seemed like it. Well, anyhow, when the teacher, Miss Rose, came back, she says, I can't believe the fine discipline you have with that child. We get along pretty well. He never said a word, and I didn't. I was so glad. And when he said it,
We had a business person who came to mind the other night as I was thinking of names, who I'm sure these people will remember. Harry Brusso,
Oh my God, he's my neighbor. for
the old
years.
Dock and Coal Company.
Yeah, he was my neighbor before he did.
Now there's someone who, again, with the Hilligases having been gone as long as they're gone and so on, it's just going to sort of fall off the.
He was a gentleman,
Yeah, Harry and
Yeah.
Winnie.
tall, slim.
So he was manager. He didn't own because the back it goes out of Plattsburgh.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
managed
I was
the Dock and
50 years
Coal.
younger, and he would call me Mrs. Nero.
Is that
He
right?
was a gentleman,
Nice old fellow.
Was he from Rouses Point?
right next door.
And had been before the job?
I don't know where he came from originally. I'm not sure. I know that he had an office at the time. The North Countryman was on the corner of Washington Avenue and Lake Street, and it was divided into two sections.
Yeah, he was.
And for a long time, he was on the far northern section. Then it seems to me they moved down to the northern end of Lake Street someplace.
Do you have any other Rouses Point businessmen like
Okay, just
Harry
a second.
King?
Before we get into it, let's take a short break here and give Calvin a 30-second rest with his shoulder. And we'll be right back. You're watching Hometown Cable. We're talking with 4 natives here, I guess, from Rouses Point, New York. We're talking about old Rouses Point, Champlain Moors, and what have you. Please stay tuned. We're talking about people. The names continue. I guess the question was, do you have any other business people? I'll bet you got tons of them.
Well, while we were off camera here, Betty mentioned the name Harry King. It happens to be somebody I had on the list here. But Harry King, a grocer in Rouses Point for many years. I remember him in the A&P, and then for years with his own grocery store on the east side of Lake Street. And of course, he lived on White Avenue.
Was he an original king from Kings Bay?
I think so.
I think so,
I
too.
think so. I think I've heard
I
that.
remember him saying, you remember his car?
Everybody remembers that car. He had a beautiful Studebaker. was really a fancy car for that day and age, and it was. I have a picture home somewhere of it. It's parked on the main street in front of the store.
Where was his store? Near?
Where that optical, right across
Okay.
Bank Hills,
Yep.
where the optical store is.
Okay.
And before that, in the old A&P building right next to the park, right adjacent, just north of the park, the next building.
Yes, where the restaurant was later and so forth, yes. You know, when they're talking about, interesting thing Betty said, Kings Bay, you know, and that name didn't come up. There were some people there named Kings, but I said, let's call it Kings Bay. That's the way it comes
That's
out.
right. That's
But
right.
many names come
Well, I
that way.
also just thought, I can remember that because I helped back Lord knows what year, transferred the groceries from one store to the other when Harry King moved the A&P from the location next to the park. The first move was almost directly across the road and what wound up being Brennan's sporting goods store.
Yeah.
And I was one of the people that helped transfer all of these
That-
groceries over from one side of the street to the other.
That originally was my grandfather's store where he sold furniture, lamps, and all kinds of stuff back in the early 1900s.
1905,
That was my grandfather's store.
Mhm. You were gonna say something before?
John Bayshard, his wife, Ann owned a, farm there for years. And one day she needed a new clothesline, and John started digging a new post for the clothesline. And they discovered the coffins, the people of the King family.
They're talking about Kings Bay now, just a little bit south of the pavilion.
John, of course, didn't want to move anything. He put everything back.
Didn't they have the priest come and?
They probably did,
I think it was back in those days, they used to bury them in the backyard. They had their own,
Yes.
they had their own cemetery.
That's not a bad idea.
But I understand a lot of those are disappearing. I thought the state said you couldn't desecrate a cemetery, but I guess that's a thing of the past now. I was talking recently with Celine Paquette, who just got a request about cemeteries, and there was a meeting a week ago, and I couldn't make it because of our reunion, but Bernadette Patry and Florence Carden went down, and we're going to make a report up. As a matter of fact, I
doing
think,
this statewide. Every
Right.
historian has to check every cemetery.
but a lot of the cemeteries that were in backyards have disappeared. They kind of plowed them under. You don't know they're there.
Well, the Week Cemetery here was moved to Maple Hills. Of course, that was quite a controversy.
There's speculation about what was moved and what wasn't. So everybody here was born in Rouses Point?
No,
Oh, where were you born, Betty?
Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, Michigan. What got you to Rouses Point?
My mother and father separated. She came back to be near her family.
She was from Rouses Point.
I went to a basketball game, and I saw the cutest soldier. This was World War II. He went on to Munich, Germany, and I didn't see him for a year.
This the same soldier you're talking about? This one?
When he came back,
Yes? You blacked straight on to him?
Boy.
How many years ago was that, you say?
almost 48.
You haven't smiled since, Earl. Come on, what's wrong?
I lost all my hair.
He's not suffering. Go on, Alan, with your...
Go ahead, Al.
Well, we might go next to a couple of doctors that I presume that maybe their names still appear on some of our birth certificates and maybe death certificates in town, but it's only going to be a matter of time before there's no one left who is in possession of one of those documents. I'm thinking of Doctors Allen from Champlain, who also, of course, had an office here, and Dr. Scalera.
How about Remillard?
And Dr. Remillard would be another one.
How about Dr. Marnes and Dr. Letourneau?
And
Oh, here we go.
Letourneau left people behind, but did Dr. Marnes have any issue?
There must be Marnes relatives here someplace.
How about
still.
Remillard?
Oh,
He just had the one daughter.
Yeah, I don't think Dr. Remillard would have any, and I'm
Really
pretty
are.
sure Dr. Allen doesn't, and I'm sure Dr. Scalera doesn't. But of course, Dr. Scalera is a little more recent than.
All right.
But he was a character.
Okay, let's just go here now. Let's stay with Dr. Marnes for a moment. Everyone's heard of the Marnes Inn, that big building here right across from the park. Is that the same
Yes,
person?
yes.
Okay.
And he had a big network of docks behind his building.
I had pictures of some of those.
There was a cannon, there was a bridge that went from the dock over to the cannon. I have all pictures of that at home.
It was very gracious.
My grandfather had the dock next to it, because he was in business right next to him. And they all had their names on their docks.
Uh-huh.
He was a cripple, I think.
I don't remember
He had a picture
Dr.
of Bob
Marnes.
Contract. he's standing in front of the new library, our new, you know,
1906,
1907. And there are no, you can see pictures of the street, and the only building is the Turner home and Ross home, that's all. And the dirt road, right out, and there's a dirt road. Dr. Barnes is there, and he had club foot, he had a heavy shoe or something, you know, it was different. You
I
can
don't
see the
remember him
picture.
that well.
So he was a practicing physician.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what- I wasn't sure whether it was just a nickname he had.
No, he sewed up his finger when he cut it off with a butcher knife.
Well,
Wow.
when I was a kid, I cut myself with a butcher knife, and I remember the girl was taking care of me. My mother had a little dress shop on the main street. So they brought me to Dr. Marnes, and all I can remember is he was laying in a bed, and he wrapped up my finger. He never
While he
got
was
up.
laying down?
He was laying like a cop
He
in
was
a bed. Now that's the only thing I remember about Dr. Marnes. He wasn't standing up. He was laying down, and he wrapped up my finger, and that was it.
How many doctors could you take your kid to when they're sick in
Yeah,
bed?
I know.
and
Yeah.
Take care
Well,
of
things have changed quite a lot, you know, yeah. Now, the other one you mentioned was Remillard?
Dr. Remillard that you mentioned.
That's Hector Kaufman's house.
Okay, that's what house he lived in.
He was noted for, he was an excellent baby doctor.
He was good.
He was one that really began to, the new method we have of saving preemies, you know, keeping them warm and isolate them in special plastic.
He also had a theory, I'll never forget, he used to tell us, because I lived a little further up the same street, and his theory back then, and it's probably been disproven 9 million times since, but his theory on cancer was that never operate, because the minute you open up, the air gets in and everything multiplies 3 times as fast. I'm sure that this theory obviously has not caught on with the AMA, but I can remember him espousing that years and years ago.
I remember standing in school, you know, for our health checkup, and he'd sit in the auditorium, and we come, and he didn't use a stethoscope, he'd listen with his ear, you know, to your chest, and I was a budding girl, and I was so embarrassed.
I would have too.
And he checked my mouth and said I had bad tonsils, and I just had my tonsils out. And I thought, I didn't like him, you know, I didn't dislike the old man. I mean, he made a big story out of that one.
My mother.
He had a stethoscope on, he just hit it.
Yes, he did.
Go ahead, Earl.
Oh, my mother, when we were kids grew up, was Dr. Marnes and Dr. Letourneau had died. I think it was Dr. Letourneau who delivered me right across the street here. I was born and brought up in the house. But Dr. Remillard was always our family doctor. Now, I've always remembered a nice old guy. He was always a good. He had maple trees in front of his house. And every spring he tapped his maple trees, and we'd come down the street from school and he'd steal a sap. And he'd come out and say, if you want it, just come in the house, I'll give it to you. But it was more fun if you took it by yourself.
Now I know what happened. I lived up the same street, now I know what happened to the sap from my maple tree.
You know, in going through your North Countryman here a year and a half
It's
ago,
a fine tribute to him.
yeah, well, there was another doctor that came into town from Detroit or Chicago, came into town, and I believe he had an office upstairs over where the North Countryman used to
Dr.
be.
Trotter.
Yes, and he burned, just after he got his office set up, they burned out. And he was married, and then they moved upstairs over where Ben Franklin's, across from the Holland, I understood.
What happened to him?
Yeah, what happened? He committed suicide.
He shot himself.
Why?
And he was, what, 30-some-odd years old?
Tell them why.
Do you know more about this?
He had a mastoid, and there was no cure for mastoid in those days. It meant you were going to die. So he shot himself. Well, it wasn't too many years later, I was about 11 years old, I came down with a mastoid.
Oh.
And I was in the hospital, and these two doctors in Plattsburgh, Dr.
Lyman Barton.
Lyman Barton, had this revolutionary new operation, and that they used it on me to save my life. Cut a hole in the back of my head here. And
Yeah.
Dr. Trotter
But
had
poor
one of
Dr. Trotter, he just killed himself because I remember Helene Sweet was on the sidewalk, she heard the shot.
And you know, I had never heard of him before, and he was here, I don't think, less than probably 2-3 years. I think he had a child, he was married, I think his mother was living there too. And it said they heard the shot, came in, went in his bedroom. And
Talk about Dr. Sclair. When Bill Kirk had 2 girls and finally a son, and he came into his place in his establishment, his bar, and he says, I have a son, I have a son. He's 21 inches long. What do you think of that, Doc? And Doc says, I was 21 years old before I was that long. He was funny.
Now, when you talk about Dr. Scolaire, I knew him, and I know he was a heart specialist. He wrote a book along with Bernard Sullivan. The word was he did not like blood. Is this the truth? Is this true?
I've always heard this.
Yeah.
I heard that someone stopped at a wreck down near Coopersville, and he said, "Is there any blood?" And they said, "Yes." He said, "I'm not going." And he really was
But he
not?
was a graduate of RPI as an electrical engineer.
He was also a captain in the Army.
Did you know that?
No?
And he loved stereo equipment. It was brand new. It was in its infancy. And you would go in his office and he'd say, "Listen to this, listen to that." And there were a whole office full of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, he made-
Never mind, let them wait. Listen to this. What do you think?
Now, you talked about one from Champlain, Dr. Allen. Dr. Allen's office was on Oak Street, the next house up from the Presbyterian Stone Church, just across from the side, across from where Mrs. Kaufman lived. And he operated on me, he did a knee on me, I had a wound in the head, he sewed that up. Great doctor, and I guess he went on to Plattsburgh from...
He had an office here in Rouses Point, over the
yes.
Rock Country Building. That's where my mother used to bring me to see him.
We're going to leave both these offices and take a short break for Hometown Cable. I'm Bob Bed, Calvin Castine, Al Ryan, Earl and Betty Merrill, and Don O'Boyle, and what a gang and what a time we're having. Hope you're enjoying these sketches of people from our area.
I had the old
We're back, and I'm Miakupa. They tell me it's not Dr. Allen that moved to Plattsburgh. That's a different one that was there. We're talking Dr. Gallo, who was in Champlain. Gallo that went on to Plattsburgh, right? Dr. Allen, his wife just passed away within the past few years, and their daughter Sydney is in Sun City something in Florida now. And she was trying to get to our reunion and told me she couldn't make it, but was glad to have been asked to be invited. All right, Al, did we cover your doctors pretty well?
I think we've covered the
Okay.
doctors except for Dr. Gagnon, who we didn't bring up until we
Okay,
started
all right.
started back into that
I
one.
remember him.
I remember him too, and as a matter of fact, well, I think at one point he and Dr. Allen were the two physicians in the area, and were the only physicians in the area, and
Right.
that changed with
Now-
Dr. Scolaire and a couple of others. But
Dr. Gallo lived, I think, where Mary Ann Kerr lives today, I believe, and I think that's where he was. He had a small office in the house
where is that, Jim?
on Oak Street, which is about 3-4 doors up from Dr. Allen, just past the track.
Okay.
And it's a white house, one of the newer frame houses on the west side, the left side as you go up the hill.
When Harold and Betty and I were talking the other day over a cup of coffee in the, we'll give the Anchorage a plug,
Well, of course.
in the Anchorage, they brought up someone that I was not familiar with, a blind piano tuner down on Montgomery Street. Do you remember mentioning
That
that?
was Charlie Duffy.
Charlie Duffy, but okay. Do you remember him at all?
No.
Don, do you?
No, I never heard of
No.
I wrote his name down and I don't have it anymore because I lost the original Abernathy or something like that.
I don't
think he
remember.
said
I
it
have
didn't.
no idea.
Now, make sure here now that it gets confused me. The name Charlie Duffy, the person who told you, that was not his name.
No.
Okay, all right.
No. Okay, we talked about Sophia Giroux. There were a couple of more Giroux in the area that were pretty prominent. One of them was Pierre,
Oh, yes.
and another one Napoleon, who used to be called Poli Giroux and was in the dairy business. Pierre was pretty much berries, I guess. up on that.
Raspberries.
Yeah.
Oh,
But, you know, some of you people may remember a little more about them
He
than...
must have, Foley must have had goats when I was young. I couldn't tolerate regular milk. They had goat's milk for a while. I remember my mother telling that story.
Where Don was, I don't remember where, I know where Pierre was, but where was Poli situated?
On the way to Champlain, on the left-hand side, where the Edgerton house is, they haven't repaired it yet.
The
Between here and
Edgerton.
Champlain.
That would be the last house before you get to the boulevard. Huh?
Yeah, just about.
It was a farm there, I think.
Okay.
Now, did he the one that made the moccasins, or was that Pierre?
That was Pierre.
That was Pierre. Was that also on that road?
Yes, right next to the, right on the corner.
Where the pet store is now.
Okay, that was Pierre, okay.
And he had the shack, I think, that he lived in prior to the house being built, and is still in the back. It's been renovated a little
Yep.
bit and changed, but I think that's the same building.
Yeah. It's the first building, it's the building between that house where Pierre lived, and I think Pierre built that house, and Dr. West, you know, the chiropractor.
Right.
It's a little tiny
Right.
log-faced house that's right there, a little
right.
building.
Well, Pierre didn't build the White House.
I thought he did.
I don't think so.
No?
I think that was that not Charlie McCain that built that
It
house?
could be, yeah,
I
you're
think
right,
so.
it is. Charlie McCain.
There's
who was-
another
Then
name.
the
Yes.
Lutzes lived there,
Yeah.
Howard Lutz, and it was for sale 2 or 3 times, and I don't know the name of the people now. The people who owned the pet store or somebody that came along and bought that property after I left, but,
Angelo Bayshore lived there for a
yes,
Angelo
while.
absolutely,
and
Marie.
Bob Lutz lived there, another, but you know, Charlie McCain probably kept that property as nice and as well kept as anybody on Route 11 if you go into Malone. He cut the grass, I think, every day with a little, you know, those hand.
And there's a name that's gone.
Yes, absolutely. I worked with him at Custom, not that long, but yes. No children, I don't believe they ever had any children. Correct.
All right, Alan, go
I
down the
don't
list.
think so.
Put that list right up here.
Even
Al.
his list is that, well,
Someone's gonna say, what's he looking at?
That's not-
There's your list.
that's
right
not the
there.
fanciest stationery in the world, as a matter of
That's
fact,
all
it's a
right.
napkin.
Alan, how about Bill Grant? You told the nicest story about Bill Grant. Do you remember Bill?
I remember Bill Grant,
He
it's
was
the
a
same
black
one.
man, the only one that lived
A
here.
good cook too, and I think he was in restaurant business.
He had been in Fort Henry or someplace, and in fact wound up going back to Fort Henry, where he was eventually murdered.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in a robbery, and it netted one of these $40 robberies or whatever.
And he was so kind.
Yeah.
But Bill Grant operated a little gas station at the foot of Coopersville Hill, which would be across the road from where the Oasis used to be. And it used to be called Little Arizona.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yes.
And Bill Grant, I mentioned to Betty the other day when we were talking that I can remember many, many years ago when I was a youngster, my father driving in that area and happened to have a flat tire right in front of Little Arizona. And Bill Grant came out and wound up changing the tire. And I can remember my father insisting that he pay him for this. And Bill Grant kept insisting that he wasn't going to, that he did this as a favor. And finally it got to the point where Bill Grant said, okay, you can pay me, but don't ever stop and ask me to do anything again. And I don't remember how it all turned out, but I do remember that Bill Grant was quite a guy.
Let me be gracious and do this for you.
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of
It
person.
seems to me he worked for the Elks Club or something at one time, I think, but he used to come to my house on the farm with my Mr. and Mrs. Lyman Castine with my mother and stepfather, and he had a lot of stories. And my mother would say, oh, Bill, you're terrible. They were good stories. And he'd say, she'd say, you're terrible. He'd say, she said, you must be awful when you're not seeing people like us and something. I remember his statement saying, I've never done anything in my life that if I turned and saw my mother or my grandmother, I would be ashamed. I'll always remember that statement, and I guess my father might have said, either your mother didn't care either, or your grandmother, or you're lying, one or the other. But Billy Grant went on, and then the last thing I know, near the Greystone Manor, he started a restaurant or something across the road. Something happened there. And we're talking about the early 50s, I think, in Warming.
Another name
I
that,
remember.
Was that the house by the side of the road?
He had
Actually, it could be.
I think so.
I think so.
He had
Really,
he was
Cal?
quite a gardener. He had, it seemed like a mile to me, but it wasn't that long, of asparagus. And Robert, of course, knew him, and he stopped one time. And nothing would do. We had to go out and look at the asparagus, pick some asparagus. Every time I went by there, I thought the beautiful asparagus, but I didn't dare go on my own.
And Harold remembers him. He says he and Dick Gaines always loved to ride in his rumble seat. And he never, ever, he'd stop for them every time he saw
Well, we
them.
hitchhiked a lot, and if Bill Grant come along, he always pick us up.
Dick Gaines and
And he'd say,
Earl.
can we get a ride in the rumble seat? Oh, you would love that.
I don't think he ever was married, or he used to have no wife. I never saw a wife with him at any time.
I don't remember any.
Yeah.
But he was a nice guy.
The only black person we had in this north country of all my life, I can remember until World War II.
Yeah, then of course, while we're at it, the other one that supplemented him, that everybody in Rouses Point knew, of course, was Sparky.
Oh, yeah.
Joe Spark from Albany, the head waiter, on the D&H, we used to play cards, we grew up with my kids and Al's kids, come take them out of the crib and hold them, and just what a nice
The
man.
barbecue on the pier Sunday, everyone said it's not the same
That's
without
right.
barbecue.
Yep.
They've been saying that for 3 or 4 years.
He died 3 or 4 years
Yeah, we
ago.
all miss it.
Another guy we might go to, and this is, Harold and Betty and I were talking about him the other day, and they made a point, that I had forgotten. But Betty or Harold, you might want to pick it up, Emil Lacrosse.
Well, I remember Emil Lacrosse because he had a taxi cab service here in Rouses Point. And when Betty and I got married, of course, we had nothing, so we hired his taxi. He drove us back and forth to the wedding. He had a beautiful Pontiac car, brand new. But I also remember, I think he started a saloon unit here in town that we have today.
It was a proud thing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he was,
Started what
he
here?
was,
The
a
saloon.
saloon unit. You
Oh,
know,
yeah, I was
they,
gonna say, it's very
for
active.
the parades and everything, boy, he was sharp.
Yeah, he loved it. He loved the Legion. He was there a lot.
I don't know whatever happened to him, but,
He married a girl from
He
Champlain.
married Pat Willett. Champlain.
You don't remember?
Well, I know Pat Willett that was married to LaFay, Jack LaFay. Is that the same Pat Willett?
I think so.
You think so? I didn't know.
I don't either.
I didn't know Mr. Lacroix.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
It certainly was a Willett, and I think it was.
he must have been a drill sergeant or something, because boy, he was sharp. He'd whip us into shape. Of course, that was years ago.
You know, while we're talking, I mentioned the name Jack LaFay. I think it's appropriate that it's very difficult when I look at old tapes now, and the person that I was talking to is no longer with us. I never had that experience until recently. Then the second one, Jack LaFay and Leon LaFountain met with us with Tom Bassett, and we talked about the invasion of Iwo Jima just last spring. And how fortunate we were to do that then, because Jack LaFay left us about a month ago. He passed away, and it's a good legacy for his kids. I get carried away on this, I won't say too much. But we really appreciate the family, that Jack was able to talk with us. And that's what this program is supposed to do. Talk about people who are gone and things that you don't want to talk about. We're still trying to find people who want to talk about the Asian War, the Japanese War, because VJ's day is coming up in 2 weeks.
50 years.
And we would like to talk about that.
In 1 week.
In 1 week, isn't it the 15th?
Is it?
Is it the 8th?
Yeah, but that's gonna be shown on the,
Oh, I beg your pardon, while you're watching, I'm working today, folks, but it'll be on the 15th, and we're trying to get people, and no one has volunteered. We got a couple of things in the works.
One thing, when we went to Jack's wake, Harold's sister was a nurse in the Hawaiian Islands. She was a captain or something in the Army Nurses Corps, and she was stationed in Hawaii, and she met Jack LaFay. He had been wounded on Tarawa, wasn't he?
He was injured on Iwo Jima. He was there a couple hours.
They were
And he
on-
got,
They
yeah.
brought him back to the Philippines.
And here these two
or the,
Rouses Pointers,
Hawaii.
thousands
Yeah.
of
My
miles
sister
away.
took care of him.
Is that, you know, something like that, I didn't think he would ever do it, but he said yes, he would. And Leon was another one that was a little reluctant at first, but did a great job, I thought. And it's the only memory we have, you know, of Iwo Jima. But, and again, I want to, our sympathies to the family. And,
Bob, I want to go back for just a minute
Yes.
to the Emile Lacrosse thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's possible, and I'm mistaken in terms of
Okay.
which Willett, and I don't want to
okay, all right.
stir up any problems here.
Okay.
If I have stated the wrong name there, I
Okay,
apologize.
we'll take a short break, and I'm going to talk to Al about that on this, during this break, and we'll take care of him. We'll talk to Al right about that. Please stay with us. We're talking old times, not old people, but past people, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of these people while we're out here.
Here's the Oasis, all right?
And had a,
Okay, we've been talking off camera here. Calvin says, everybody know where the Oasis was? Well, I lived in Coopersville. If you left Coopersville and went over the overpass toward Rouses Point, as soon as you got down over the bottom and back onto solid land, on the left was the Oasis, operated by Judge Smith.
Yeah.
And in one of the employees he had was a Mrs. Cadman.
oh, yeah.
And they had a daughter named
Joyce.
Joyce, who was in my graduating class. And she's the only one in our class that has passed away. I found that out 5 years ago when we had our first reunion.
Mrs. Cadman was Florence, I believe.
I don't remember her
And
name.
I just have one question for you.
Yes.
You came over the underpass or the overpass.
Yeah.
And then you got back on solid land. What were you driving on when you?
I was on that built-up bridge, not on the dirt.
I thought maybe you were
It was
flying.
airborne. It was
And
airborne.
on the left-hand side was this little Arizona where we talked about Billy Grant. That was right on that side. And as you proceed, another interesting thing, as you proceed toward the lake and toward Kings Bay, there was a nice picture in a North Countryman years ago of a tree. That was it's big spread in the North Countryman or the Plattsburgh paper, I forget which. And that tree is right there on the right, and it just is. It's a tree that everyone notices during the year. You really
It's
would-
perfect.
It's a perfect tree, a perfect. It looks like a pear tree. It is a perfect shaped tree. All right,
Don?
Yeah, Don. Don said, "What are we going to talk about?" I said, "I don't know, but talk about your dog." Well, tell us about your dog. You told me a little story last night, and well, first of all, tell her about your husband and what he did and how well he was known.
Well,
Bob.
people, knew us, knew Bob well. He came from Andover, New York. But being Irish, he had a gift of gab, everybody knew him. I often thought he knew more people when he came than I did all my life. He knew everybody because we had the garage and things. Of course, he liked to drink, and Legion was pretty handy right across the road.
That was on Pratt Street here in
One
town.
afternoon, must have been one of these hot days, I went over there with him, looking for him. But anyhow, we had a drink. And then, I think I went home for a while, gave up my home. And he stayed quite long, and they had quite a hassle. It was a problem, argument, and went to court finally. And a few days later, it was a small court session, and Bob Smith was the lawyer for one of these men, and he kept referring to Sam. He says, Sam was right there, he saw the whole thing. And they kept talking about Sam, and finally, the judge, whoever the judge was, said, who is this Sam? And it was our big dog.
Boxer.
Big boxer.
Sam the boxer.
Sam the boxer.
And when he heard that, I guess he threw it out of court or something. I don't know.
He was a Brendel, wasn't he? Was he a Fawn or Brendel?
Well,
What do we call
He
him?
was tan.
Yeah, tan. Right.
Tan with a big-
And he used to sit in the passenger seat and just sit right up there when Bob would drive around. He never went anywhere without him, I guess.
Don, do you remember, and this is going back to the garage over there, back many, many years ago, something I saw there and don't ever, I'm sure there were others, but I don't ever recall seeing anyplace else in George Stan's garage. On a post, there was a cigarette machine that doled out for a penny one cigarette. Do you remember that?
No.
Bill Slingsby had one
Did he?
from World War II.
Well, I remember the one on the post in the garage.
One
Did
cent,
you use it?
1 cent for one cigarette.
Oh, many times. I don't know whether I got sensations or wings, but
Yeah, but don't forget, we could buy a pack of cigarettes for 10 cents, so 1 cent for a cigarette.
Yes.
When you were speaking of dogs, Harold had a dog. Brought it home from Germany after World War II.
T-bar.
You remember. The dog came home before he did, and the express agent called Mr. and Mrs. Miro and said, we have a package from Munich, Germany for you. Now, what did the kids send home? They thought Steins or something like that. They went up to the express office, and there's a woof, woof. And by the time Harold got home, the dog had belonged to his mother.
Yeah. You know, when people watching this, most of the people are from small communities, and you know exactly what we're talking about. Here's a dog's name that probably hasn't been mentioned in 40 years.
True.
And this guy right here, who's thinking the last thing you think of is that dog, just named the dog. T-Bar.
I'm surprised you remembered
You
that.
see, this is what you get in small towns, and this is one of the reasons I think that Al was talking today about these things, is that he said, it'd be nice to remember these people and just the way we remember them. Nothing
I'm not sure P-bar is a people.
No, but it is. He's the person that had the dog.
Her dog Sambo, she used to have to put a pin a note on his collar and go to Legion, please don't feed him anything to drink, because he loved to drink. The dog could get drunk.
Sad enough, though, he went so much there that he ate a lot of potato chips,
Don, there was a,
And the salt killed him.
Is that right?
Eventually, they caused a kidney disease, too much salt. And then
Don, Do you remember, and this is somebody I mentioned to Harold and Betty the other day, and they didn't remember him. Do you remember Harry Mantel?
Briefly.
I can remember.
Do you?
I do.
Very odd little man.
I remember he worked for the customs and had a very sharp nose. I can remember that. Not a very big fella, but there's someone who, you know, name probably hasn't been mentioned
A
here.
lonesome polecat.
Yeah, and another one, Leon Forges. Do you remember Leon Forges? Customs, lived at the Holland Hotel.
I know Francis, but
Very, very involved in veterans, the parades and everything back many years ago.
You know, the Holland, I guess, probably was as famous for people who came there and lived as for just people coming off the street. You know, like Sparky was always there, you know, he was like a customer, but he was there all the time.
how about Adele Mepin?
All right, I don't know, who's Adele?
That's where they found the diamonds.
Oh, okay. Well, tell us about that story. People out there don't know about that story. What can you tell us about
I
that?
don't know if I can tell it on camera.
Well,
They took this woman off the train coming down from Montreal, and they brought her to the Holland for the matron to search her. And by the time the matron got there, she searched her, body cavity and all, and there was nothing. But the next day, someone used the toilet, and it plugged. So they called Wally Willett, who was long gone, and he sent a man over by the name of Dolph Willett. And he fished around, and he came up with this bag of diamonds.
There was another guy there too, Oliver LaValle.
Oliver LaValle.
Wally's.
And there was a big reward for finding these, but I don't think those two men ever.
well, the story I heard on that,
So,
well, the story I heard on that was the person who found it said that he should get the reward because after all, he's the one that found it and turned it in. And then Wally Willett said, well, if you get the reward, it belongs to me because whatever you do when you're working for me and I'm paying you belongs to me. And then the hotel owner, Mr. Jilton, said, well,
My property.
It's in my property and it should be mine. And the way it turned out that she did get the reward, and it was national news. It was on the CBS News, and it was, I think, Life magazine. It was a big play. It was a big story.
I covered that story.
Did you? Very interesting
Little
story.
Holland and Little Rouses
Yeah,
Point.
yeah.
Okay,
I had one other thing. We
Yeah.
talked about the Holland a lot because it's always been there, it seems like for 199 years. Old Charlie Bobo, when I was a kid, he must have owned Holland or his family owned.
he did.
He was a Spanish-American War veteran, our only Spanish-American War veteran. And for many, many years after he came home, he always led the parade when they'd have a parade through town. And until he couldn't walk anymore, then they put him in a car. But he wrote a couple of books, reminiscence of the Spanish-American War, and everybody in town had, I've got 2 copies of them home today.
Autograph.
Both my grandmothers, both had copies of his book.
He didn't have any children?
Not that I know.
I don't think so.
And they talked about Rouses Point in the book or about the
All
war?
kind of pictures, pictures of Ross.
Oh, yeah?
There's pictures of
I have
the
I'll have to
troops
check that.
loading on the train in Plattsburgh. They went right out of Plattsburgh.
Yeah?
You know, you were talking a couple of minutes ago about business owners, i.e. Bob O'Boyle and Sam. Does anybody remember Harold Moore?
Oh, yes.
And what was Harold Moore? It was really Buzz Boomer, Buzz Harris's dog originally, and it wound
Big
up with
black-
Harold Moore
Was he a
or what?
poodle, a big?
Harold Moore
Yeah,
had,
he was a big hairy,
he ran the
Old
garage on the main street where our drugstore is today.
used to be, then it went Four Rights.
Before Harold Moore was Boright's.
Uh-huh.
When I was just a little kid, it was Boright's garage, and then Harold Moore took it over.
Was he
I thought it
from
was the other
town?
way around. but-
Right.
Was he related to like Stanley and that Moore family?
I don't know, Clyde Moore was his brother. Clyde Moore lived here, up here on Maple Street. And Harold Moore married Nolan, Ann Nolan,
Pat Nolan?
and they were from Rouses Point. Nolans were an old family here in Rouses
Casey's
Point.
related to the
And
Caseys.
he had a Chris Craft on the lake, and every once in a while, he'd take me for a ride in Chris Craft. To ride in a Chris Craft.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
You know, while this isn't people, but the one building that was probably the most noted building probably in Rouses Point was the Chapman Building. It was located where the Adirondack Hardware is today, right?
Beautiful.
Next to the park. What do people remember about the Chapman and who was it named after? Do you remember any stories about Mr. Chapman, or is that too old?
Probably has to be the same guy that they named the street after.
It is, it
It
is.
was quite a while to do. I'm pretty sure He was a lumberman, he paid for lumber and had it shipped out of here. That's
Uh-huh.
how he started making his money.
He built, didn't he the one that built the house where Art Spiegel is, the big, I think that was.
No, that was Weston.
No, Weston didn't build it,
No.
no. It was built in the 1830s, 40s, and Weston did, Weston was an
There's
owner.
another name that you don't hear.
No,
anymore.
I think it's Chapman.
Andy
Chapman was the one who
Weston.
built it.
I haven't-
Andy Weston and his brother, you don't hear those
Charlie?
names.
Charlie, yeah.
The Westons are the ones who built the original bridge over
There's a Rouses Point
the
bridge.
lake. We'll take a short break again and come back and we'll find out, I think it's Chapman that built that building way back. Please stay tuned. A little bit different show this morning. You're not making a tour, but you are vocally anyway. Thanks for watching Hometown Cable. We'll get right into that. You know, we don't even stop it, we're off camera. That's when it gets more interesting sometimes. They were talking about the Marge building. You talked about where it's now the video store or West Old Service Station. That was built by Dr. Marge?
That was Dr. Marge's garage. And that old Chapman block was there long before that. I don't
Yes, that Chapman block of course had the post office and it had the clothing store at one time, Meyer.
Clyde Lemoy had a novelty shop there, or we used to buy ice cream sodas.
We're sitting in the Knights of Columbus now. The Knights of Columbus rooms were up on top of that building.
That's right.
You know what I remember was,
CBA too, I remember
the
climbing
Catholic
upstairs.
Daughters was on the 3rd floor.
Bringing dishes.
And of course, when my mother had anything to do with the Catholic Daughters, we had to climb those stairs and lug everything up there. We always helped, you know.
Yeah,
We
more
brought all the food up, there was no kitchen.
Morris Pondrio gave a few pool lessons up in that
Yeah,
building.
it was.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the
Mark-
KC had the 2nd floor, they had the better part of it.
Morris Palmer probably one of the best pool players ever up in the northern tier, isn't he?
Certainly
Pretty good
was.
golfer too.
Huh?
Good golfer.
Good golfer
And
too.
don't never play checkers.
How was his cleaning business? Pretty good cleaner too?
Yes.
I don't know, he was never there.
He took people to the cleaners on the pool table.
All right.
When you look up the word hustler in the dictionary and Morris Pondrio, the name appears right after.
We didn't mention the Westons though, and they certainly did a lot for the area.
Yeah.
They started the golf club.
Well,
Yeah,
They
okay.
gave the land.
Okay, well, that's a good thought. I guess I hadn't mentioned them because there were things
well
that,
known.
well, and on top of that, the bridge is always going to stand as a memoir.
Well, it's got-
And
it's got-
One way or another,
Yeah.
what's left of it.
Pictures.
And-
Well, up the fort, yes.
And the fort and,
Uh-huh.
but in any event, I want to go to Moores for a minute. 'Cause I know
Okay.
we may have some people with Moores that,
Right.
I
Let
don't
me
know.
start off in Moore's first. And I want to tell you what I found out. When we did the Moores with Mr. Bogan, I mentioned Edgar Morgan, what a great person he had been to the school in that district. He was on the school board, and I knew Edgar Morgan, a fine man. He was president of the school board. And later on, I was talking with Betty Loren, Dick Loren's wife, from Clinton, and Clinton Farm, and she said, Bob, I really appreciate your mentioning that man because she was raised by Edgar Morgan,
I think
and
she
then
knows.
related to Al Ryan. Tell us
I think
about.
Alan could tell us.
Yes.
Well, Edgar Morgan was my stepmother's brother.
I didn't know that when I was saying those nice things. But
You mean you wouldn't have said those nice things?
No. I mean, I had no reason except I really believed that, and I still do. But I didn't realize that he was related to you.
Yeah. But I was going to mention a couple of hotels, and I don't know how many people, you remember the Purdy Hotel
Oh, yes.
on the corner where the light is now?
Big, white, gracious.
And speaking of dogs around businesses, a big old St. Bernard that was out there for years.
And they
years
didn't
years.
have a porch, they had a veranda.
And before that, there was a hotel.
Now that's located for you people who don't know, right directly across from Manette's furniture store.
At the light and on the southwest corner of that intersection.
Right.
Another hotel, which dates back well before the Purdy Hotel, was Charlie Wager's Hotel. And I remember, that's when my father was a customs officer before he went into the newspaper business. He was stationed at Moores during Prohibition, and he lived at Charlie Wager's Hotel. It later became the Slipper Factory.
All right, yes, that was a very busy corner out there. We hope to be talking with some people from Moore's. We've been putting it off for a year, trying to get the people that would be willing to work with us and talk about that all. That Wages Hotel burned, I believe, later on. At least parts of it did. That was a busy corner right there.
Yeah, and as I said, I don't remember the hotel itself. I remember seeing pictures of it, and I remember hearing stories about it. But Charlie Wager was the guy who ran that hotel.
Moore's Junction it was called right there.
I have grandmother that lived right up the tracks from there. And there's some people up there that I don't know what has happened to them, and I don't know that if they have relatives remain. I'd rather think they don't, but a couple of names that come to mind are Fulton Prest and Arthur Priest. When I was a youngster and used to visit my grandmother up there.
That's a Hemingford name, Conrad Priest.
Did Arthur Priest ever own a feed business?
I think so.
I think so. I remember him when I lived in Holland, yes.
And Fulton Prest was I'm not sure what he did, but he lived, you know where the Curtis house is, or was on Hemingford Street, right next to the railroad tracks?
I don't know for sure.
Well, that was my grandmother's, and Fulton Prest lived right on the other side of the track. And right across the street was the old custom house, little green building. Do you remember that?
No, but I've seen a picture. I don't remember.
That's a house that, for example, Bob Guerin grew up in. He later went on to own the car agency here.
Okay.
And he and 4011 Brothers.
Yes. Yep. I knew a few of those. Went to school with them.
But I just thought I'd throw in a wars thing there because, Dawn, I need to ask you, and again, I asked Earl and Betty the other day, and they don't recall, and I haven't found anybody else that remembers it, to be honest with you, but I do, vaguely. Back when I was a youngster, there was, and I think he lived on Washington Avenue, there was an older gentleman who reputedly had more money than, he was a millionaire, supposedly, dressed anything but as a millionaire. His name, I think, was Hetherington. Do you remember, does that name mean anything to you?
Never heard.
He was supposedly a millionaire that, one of those people who didn't want anybody to think he was, but don't feel badly because they don't remember it either, and I remember very little about it.
The only one name I remember in that area was Colonel Crothers.
But but he was down on Montgomery Street.
But he lived up on that street
Did he?
for a long time where your uncle built himself. That'd be quite
That would be quite a...
Going back to
Why
wars
not?
a minute, I have a very nice tape of Mr. Bowden, A History of Wars.
Yes, I've seen that one, yes.
So look that up.
Yeah, I've seen that one, part of that way back, yes. And we talked with him later, too. One of the finest teacher I ever had in my life. I've said that a dozen times. Just a great person. I told him one time on TV that he made a mistake, not a mistake, but we were at a loss when he became principal because he was such a great teacher. And you can make principals, but you can't make teachers. There are teachers who can teach, and he was one.
Another name that came up the other day, and this gentleman's been dead for some time, I think, Wally LaMonday.
Oh, gee.
Do you remember Wally LaMonday?
With his steamroller?
His steamroller, and the story has it that Wally LaMonday, of course, lived out on a Hayford Road in a shack.
I brought him home several times because he needed a ride, and I just gave him a ride.
And he used to wander to and fro among the fields and the woods and so on as part of his daily routine. And the story is that Wally used to chew tobacco, and he would get his use out of the particular cut of tobacco, and then the next fence post he walked by, he would deposit the wad of tobacco on top of the fence post. And he had numerous fence posts covered with wads of tobacco, and then a month or two later he would go by and he would rescue the tobacco as he walked by and smoke it in his pipe. That's a Wally LaMonday story.
You know, we were on a schedule here, convention, they had to be out of here by 12:30, it's just about that time. So we'll just take another short break, see where we are, and work to closing this. This is again, different type of program than we've had, but we've met some people we haven't talked to before. It's nice to see Al up here, always good to see him. I hear from him during the year. Vero Beach is lucky to have Al Ryan. Al Ryan was a great instigator, and I use that word, instigator. He was a great sportsman. He started teams here, and he was a promoter of sports in this area. We miss you, Al, very much.
Thank you.
Over the years. And I've been a personal friend of Al for 40 some odd years, and it's so nice that he volunteered to do this, because the last time we talked him into talking with us, he wasn't ready to jump right in, and this time I'm glad. He must have said, God, he likes to be on TV.
Well, I got sick of you picking on him.
We'll be right back. Thanks for watching Hometown Cable. Again, I repeat, every Sunday we're on with this program, What's Going On Here, and every day during the week 5 programs start at 12:30, another one at 4:15, 8 p.m., midnight, and 8 the following morning, 5 times to see the same show. There's not an excuse for not seeing one of those or parts of whatever you like, and there's not an excuse for not being a patron. You become a patron, Hometown Cable, send a gift, $12 or more to Hometown Cable. Costs money to run this.
And what is that, dial 298 home link?
Remember
Oh, that's
298 home. One of the ones that I thought we might talk about, and they also know he was too well known and he's still relatives in the area. That was that guy that had all the buttons on his shirt. Is that the guy? Who is he?
Willie.
Tell us a little bit about him. What is it about those buttons?
You just like to collect them, I guess.
He had them all over his front.
And rings on every finger,
Yes.
and some on the thumbs.
Yeah. Now, where did he work?
drugstore.
Drugstore.
Okay. Then the other one I think is, who's the fellow that used to like to keep the streets real clean here with his little car?
Louis Barcombe, and you know we have a street sweeper now, but the place is not as clean as when he, with his little push cart. He took such pride in it.
There was an old fellow who used to come into Rouses Point. He stood down by Pearl's store on the corner. I would tell Al about Jim Ingram. And all I knew about Jim Ingram was when it got cold, he let his face and his beard grow. And he would never shave until spring. So you could tell by Jim Ingram what time of the year it was.
Another guy you mentioned, now that you mentioned Ingram, I remember this one, Nate Chilton.
Nate? Oh, yeah.
Who was Nate Chilton?
Oh, he was an old recluse who used to live here in Rouses Point, and he used to have a little wooden cart when he'd go down to the store, and he would go along and he had a big long overcoat, that little wooden cart. And
Nate Chilton lived in the house which is now Jules Tran's
Yeah.
house, I believe. Certainly in that area, and I think.
Not
they
Jules
used to-
Trader's house, the one that Emery lived in.
Okay.
The brick
Yeah,
house.
the big red brick house.
But he used to haul that cart back and forth.
Well, that was his shopping cart.
You know, another name, he's still living, he's not well, I think he's in the hospital, but a fixture in Champlain for 70 years is a little man named Floyd LaFawn.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Another wagon puller.
Another wagon puller who delivered mail 2 and 3 times a day
He's in
from
the
the post
hospital?
office, yes, all the way up to the shop. And he never really had, I think, what you'd call a full-time job, but he would do these things. He was a great volunteer for the fire department. He helped our bazaar for the last 28 years. He's now well. He had that little cart he would pull, and the shop would give him a few bucks for delivering the mail, and he did work for other people. I think he picked up groceries for people, and he walked, he was on the street a lot, and he'd shift from one gear to the other, and just a lovable person, Floyd LaFawn. And if anybody out there is so moved, a card, I think would be appreciated by Floyd in the hospital.
At the Plattsburgh Hospital.
I believe he's in the Plattsburgh Hospital, yeah. He's not well, and he's a fixture, a real fixture, you know. Here I am, tearing up. Well, anything else? Anybody? You mentioned a baker. You want to mention Baker?
Oh, Bert Baker.
Yes.
Who worked for a number of people in town, Jules Tran, one of the last, I guess. But Bert was kind of a fixture around town, and somebody all the kids knew.
Another fixture, John Mandigo.
John Mandigo, who
You know,
died recently.
Bert Baker, one time, when Robert was in the fall, he wanted to put some lime on the garden for next year, and Bert needed the money. So Robert, I don't know what the agreement was, but he went out in the field. I was teaching, and like, in those days we'd come home at noon, Bert was out there. When I came back, Bert was still out there, whatever. And he came back, and he was a tall man, and you remember his eyes? He had
Very droopy and red.
Red eyes.
Like a setter.
All you could see was his red eyes. He was covered with, it was a windy day, and he was covered with lime, pure white. He looked like a ghost, and I know who he was. The eyes, all you could see was his eyes. Oh,
Yeah, I don't know what you talk about when you get together over coffee and things. Maybe we're talking about the current things, but why don't you try a next session or two, everybody out there, start talking about these people that are no longer with us, that you've got fond memories of, that you owe a lot to, like the teachers we started off with. Couldn't have started off with better people than teachers. We owe so much to our teachers, and we take for granted the teachers we have today, but 40 years from today, you're going to say nice
And
things.
we just sort of passed over Don O'Boyle because she's sitting here, but Don O'Boyle was,
40 years.
absolutely, and one of the, generally recognized, I think, as one of the most likable and finest teachers in the system when she was there.
Embarrassed me, really.
No, and wait though, but she liked to spank the kids. You got to be very careful. But I want one more thing about
You
that.
gotta get a medal for that.
I'm sorry, is that the-
I think it was a year ago, I think, that not only we thought she was a great person, but the Chamber of Commerce. This person, their senior, I shouldn't say senior, the Citizen of the Year in the Northern Tier. And we were very proud to have been there, and it's a great honor to you, Don. And I know all you do for us as the, not only librarian at the historian office, but you do the work to get the stuff there so you can show it. And there's not enough people who go up there to look that over. Don is very, very helpful. And it's been great to me when I go up there, and I really appreciate her very much.
I miss you coming up.
Well, you know what happened, Don?
You're busy.
I spent so much time up there and in filing that information I picked up that I'm so far behind on every other paperwork that I got home, I haven't caught up yet. But when it gets cold again, I will be back up every Wednesday, and I'll be seeing you, and I'll be going through those again.
Cry.
Oh, yes, we really do. All right, we hope.
Don't cry, Alan's got a lot of water down his way.
You're talking about Don O'Boyle, where she's got the North Countryman. What about Dick Preto, who wrote
okay.
the North Countryman for years?
Perhaps you didn't know.
You picked up the North Countryman, you went right to perhaps you didn't know, and he didn't miss a damn thing.
You know,
That's everything that happened in this town.
talked about him last
Hold on.
yes, when we talked about, and he not only didn't miss a thing, he didn't miss a day of work. I think he had something like 20 some odd years, never missed a day.
And some of them were tough.
Yeah.
Larry Cronin was home on a furlough, and I was helping Larry put his boat in the lake.
In March or...
And this was in the early part of the spring, it was cold, and I fell in. And I said, boy, I'm glad nobody saw me because I'd be in the paper. Sure enough, Thursday was gonna be the
Paper again.
I was the first one to go swimming.
That's what the old papers were, the paper, not only the North Country, but other papers have changed in that regard, you know. And it would talk about Al Ryan and his mother visiting her brother in Moore,
That
you
was
know.
fun.
Well, yes, it was. It was
Nothing.
information, you know,
There
that
was no
today,
business.
you know, we're too busy, I think, on TV.
Harry Hayford, who lived in the Marnes Inn, is the one that saw him and
Yeah.
told Dick Preto,
Yeah.
first swimmer of the season.
You know, and you vaguely mentioned Lawrence Cronin. Now, there's another one that is gone and died, and there's no family members remaining
We
in the
still
area.
miss Larry.
A cousin, Billy Gray, living out in California, someplace far as I know, is still alive.
His daughter's a deputy sheriff.
But
down
Larry
in Maryland.
Cronin is quite an athlete in high school, and also,
Colonel in the Air Force when he
yeah,
got out.
and used to walk across the peak of houses without any problem. I remember walking across the Spear House peak 1 foot, angling the
He was
ice.
good at
Kinda
apple
daredevil.
fights. Good at apple fights.
I
too.
remember he used to ride around Rouses Point, sitting on the handlebars on his bicycle, riding backwards.
Is that right?
Oh, look, Mom.
You know,
And the first thing he did in the morning was wake up and open the window and shoot crows out of the tree. And most people go for juice and coffee. He
I
went
know
for
he
crows.
he really loved Lake Champlain.
Yeah.
He loved the boats and the skiing and everything.
How things change. Rouses Point, named after Rouse. There's not a Rouse left in town. What family has done much more than the Breenbergs for Champlain, New York? There's not a Breenberg left in the
McClellans.
community, the McClellans. But this past weekend, we had our reunion. There were 7 Breenbergs there, and some hadn't seen each other for 40 years. They had a great reunion of their own, and it was a nice weekend. And
Was Elizabeth there?
Yes, she was, and Harold was there. And I've already started to get a lot of comments from the Saturday night show. We had 15 minutes of Francis, St. Maxim's, and the Breenbergs having a jam session in their house. 15 minutes of Mrs. Francis Fitzgerald, St. Maxim's, and then Henry Greenberg with his slide trombone. It was a very different, and we've had nice comments about that. But we really appreciate taking the time out. Thank you for the idea for this different, but I think very interesting show. Someone's going to go down. People like Dawn, who's here today, she will never be forgotten, but I don't know how many times it'll be called. And the man with 40 some odd years on the railroad, you know, and Betty, 30 years at the library. These are places we don't patronize our libraries enough. You can't The salary, you put all the money away you made while you were at the library, Betty? Absolutely nothing. And you know, there's a lot of criticism, but visit your libraries. Donate to your libraries when they come around. Al Wright, good to see you again.
Thank you.
And you'll be up here another 10 days, so when you see around Rouses Point, you'll see Al stopping. Well, it'll be 3 days by the time you watch this. But nice to see you. And
Bring money.
Helping build memories.
You help them build memories.
Well, if we help to perpetuate any names,
Yes.
at least we've got them
Yes.
stored on a videotape
Exactly.
someplace. And
Exactly.
you know, I think that's important because it's just a shame that so many people who were part of our heritage have just dropped off and nobody's thought of them.
Wow.
And if you want to get some real memories, run up to the historian's office and open the 1947 or 1952 North Countryman, and you got them all in there. Just turn the pages and names come back like this and like this to you. We thank Calvin for putting up with us here. He says, who are all these people? And he sits there with the camera. Calvin busy 8, 10.
So who are all these people here?
Yeah,
Who are these
you know,
four?
all these people here. You
Boy,
would have
we
these
know
names.
him.
And Calvin is building not only this program today, but programs of your friends, relatives, and neighbors. When he shows these memories of 6 years ago, you know, you kind of forget that people have changed in 6
And
years.
don't forget the number is 298 Homely.
Oh yeah, 298-HOME, 298-4663. Thank you for tuning. We'll see you next Sunday. If you've got any comments about the content of any program or what you'd like to see, make it known to Calvin or I or Sam or someone who you've seen on Hometown Cable, and we'll try to we'll endeavor to bring something that you want to see and different things. We'll work on